Okay, so let's take a look at the Battlefield 1 minimum system requirements. For an AMD CPU, you require an AMD FX 6350. For an Intel CPU, it is an i5 6600K. And for minimums, that's very steep indeed. For memory, okay, pretty standard, 8GB of RAM. I would have expected to see that. Graphics card, AMD Radeon HD 7850. Okay, so bit low on the GPU side, but for minimum that is actually quite high. For an Nvidia GPU, you require an Nvidia GeForce GTX 660. So now, let's take a look at the recommended. The minimum spec isn't anything I haven't seen before. However, the recommended spec, this is where it gets interesting. Either an AMD FX 8350 or an i7 4790. 16GB of memory. Okay, I have not seen that before in the recommended spec of a game. The most I've ever seen is 8. For a GPU, it is either an AMD Radeon RX 480 or GTX 1060. Yeah, so why am I telling you the Battlefield 1 system requirements? Well, you see that Battlefield 1 gameplay in the background? You want to know the spec of this PC this was recorded with? Well, I'm going to give you them. An AMD FX 6300, a Radeon R9 380, and 8GB of DDR3. And all this was played at practically maximum settings, 1080p. So what am I trying to prove here? The answer is simple. The thing I'm trying to prove is that just because you don't meet the system requirements doesn't mean you cannot run a game. Alright, so now let's take Doom. That requires an AMD FX 8320 at minimum. And I have an FX 6300 sitting on my rig, as I previously said. Well, I can run that very stably with that FX 6300. Also, let's take RAM as an example. Now, if you watch my 4GB versus 8GB of RAM video, I played numerous games with 4GB of RAM and then also played them with 8GB of RAM. In this test, I also played Fallout 4 and Doom. Both games required 8GB of RAM. And just so I don't make you click on the video and watch through the whole thing, taking away 4GB of RAM did absolutely nothing to the FPS. Both games still played extremely well. Doom was playing at maximum settings, and the FPS wasn't taking a hit whatsoever. So I've proved that system requirements can be inaccurate in the fact that they over-exaggerate the system requirements, but can they under-exaggerate the system requirements? My answer is yes. Take the Crysis 3 recommended requirements. It decided to go with a GTX 560 for recommended. Now keep in mind I have an R9 380 which is the equivalent to a GTX 960, and I beat all the other requirements by absolutely miles. So let's put my PC on Crysis 3 on maximum settings. Let's go. So Crysis 3 on maximum settings, this certainly was an interesting one. So for the minimum frames, I got 14 frames a second. For the maximum, I got 105 frames a second. And on the average, I got 39 FPS. Keep in mind, this is on the absolute maximum settings, and it recommended a GTX 560 GPU. Now this is the equivalent of a 960, so 4 generations ahead. And I barely scraped 60 FPS in most circumstances. So the overall message of this video is you shouldn't base it off of system requirements alone, because sometimes these can be inaccurate. Admittedly, sometimes it could be very accurate indeed. So for example, the Battlefield 4 minimum and recommended. But for some and even most games, this is not accurate whatsoever. Now, I know probably most of the people who watch How to Compute already know this information, but this video is for those out there who don't know the inaccuracies of system requirements. So if you did learn something new or you found this video helpful, please be sure to leave a like, comment, and if you're new here, then maybe even subscribe for more, I guess. But anyway guys, I am Duo from How to Compute, and I will catch you all next time.